The time to build is upon us.
With great power comes great responsibility.
You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves, an irrational fear of the unknown.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
This is the Superhuman Academy podcast.
No, it's all good. It's good to see you again.
Same. How have things been?
They've been good. Yeah, I've been staying really active recently. How about you?
It's been a great couple months here getting kids into school. My oldest is a sophomore at Heron. Just really impressed with Heron High School and the way that they empower those kids to own the culture. And they've got a fantastic cross country program that she participates in. That is the coach there, Dave Pappas, is just really does a great job leading those kids out of values. And then my youngest son, my middle child, my son is in 8th grade now, and he's doing a homeschool curriculum a couple days a week, and then is in the office with me 2 days a week.
Oh, cool.
Has a job working this year in our staging company. And
Nice.
it's been great. To see him get to participate in a team and know that he has real roles and responsibilities, but he's a part of it. I think it has been really, really fun, and it's fun to see him gain that understanding of where he fits right within the team. And then my youngest is in 5th grade, so last year of elementary school at the Oaks Brooks Fall Creek. And what's really she just she's like a beam of positive energy, and I think is more emotionally aware than I. She'll walk up, it's like, "Hey Dad, are you okay today? You all right?" Like, just it's like, I don't know, maybe yeah, today was kind of hard. And it's like, "You want to talk about it?" And it's like, maybe I do want to talk about it.
Oh man, that's amazing.
It's great. It's what's really I'm wrapping my mind around with my kids is that next year we'll have 2 high schoolers and a middle schooler. And my wife and I have been on this journey, right? That is getting ready to head into a new chapter in 7.5 years, which sounds like a long time, but it goes by pretty quick. Our lives are changing pretty dramatically. So
Yeah.
Trying to spend some time now thinking about what that's going to look like, and how can we proactively prepare for not just the shift in the daily rhythms, which they absolutely, down to like, I get up in the morning and make breakfast for everybody. And it's almost like hosting a talk show, right? It's just, the guests are coming up and you're interviewing, and in 8 years, 7.5, 8 years, I won't, be doing that regularly anymore. And trying to think about what, can I proactively press into what that time is going to look like, and what we're going to fill it with, and what's going to be a good transition. Because I think if I don't, I'm going to react to the fact that there's a gap there that I don't have an answer for, which is a bit traumatic, right? That's a pretty big shift. So that's I'm doing well. Long way of saying doing well. Glad to be here. How are you?
I'm doing well as well. I wanted to ask though, you said you make breakfast for your family every morning?
I do. It is the high point of the day. We kind of all get going. My wife and my oldest are right now, and this wasn't always the case, the early risers. They actually get up about 5:30, and that started over the summer. But my 15-year-old at this point in life, she is really craving that, and it's wonderful at that morning time with my wife and her, her mom is I think where everybody seems to be at their best as far as like frontal lobe engagement.
Yeah.
Nothing is overwhelming yet. Um, so they kind of have that first half hour of the day where it's just them, and that's been really great to watch and experience. Then I kind of get going around 6 o'clock and come down, get the coffee running and breakfast going, and this kind of rolling dialogue between the three of us starts, playing out until 6:30 or so, and then we wake up the other two. They come down, and my wife goes out to get ready for the day. I've got the three kids, and I'm I love to cook, right? So this is it's uh just a blast to sit there and get to kind of host the table as we're chatting about what's the day look like. And we listened to this daily reflection that a guy by the name of Glenn McDonald puts out. It's called Morning Reflections, and he is a Presbyterian pastor by trade, but a real historian and teacher, and just a great writer. I don't know how he puts together what he puts together every day, but he does it in an email format, and then he does it. He provides it in kind of a podcast set up over SoundCloud. And so we just we listen to that. It's maybe 3-4 minutes, and then just kind of give some talking points and a something to center around as we get ready for what's ahead. But that's just a really special rhythm. I know I'm gonna mourn it tremendously when it changes. But I'm trying to be as present as I can for that, because it's been a really fun part of our daily family rhythm for a long time now.
Yeah, it sounds like a really meaningful way to start the day.
Oh, it's great. It really, and sometimes it's hard, right? Sometimes it's, there are emotions and gosh, nobody peaked at like middle school ages, right? So we're right in the thick of one, is coming out of that. One's right in the middle of it. One's heading into it, and brain chemistry is exploding, and physical development is exploding. Nothing is proportionate. My son's voice is cracking, and so it's this time of just massive change. And I think that for all of us, like we all, the game that we're in is always changing, and we're changing too, right? So we're all kind of micro reorienting, and sometimes you head into the day and that's just unsettling, right? Destabilizing. The things we know of who we are and today, and right, are colliding with who we're becoming. And for kids, right, in that development, like they are literally becoming right before your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's easy to forget how unsettling and destabilizing that even that physical change, right, creates this question of, oh man, I thought I knew who I might be yesterday, but I'm legitimately different today.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a time where I think even in the conflict of siblings and the imperfection of parents, we gain these data points to reorient and be reminded of who we are, and take that next step into who we're becoming, and take a breath, and then head out into a day in a world full of things that will challenge all of that, right? So not to intellectualize breakfast too much, but it's a great rhythm.
Yeah, well, I wanted to poke at it more because my impression of you is that you're a very intentional person. Like that's the word that comes to mind. And when I talk to intentional people and they tell me like what they do with their time, it makes me think, well, how did this come about? Because it probably didn't come about completely randomly.
Mm.
And even if it did come about randomly, they probably would have evaluated it, looked at it, and then decided at some point they made it a semi-conscious decision at least to keep it that way.
Mm.
And I want to explore like what were those decisions or how did that come about? Because that's,
Oh man.
people ask about or people think about in my community anyway, morning routines all the time. It's like this big
Mm.
thing, right? How you start your day really shapes a lot of your life.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's
your morning
good.
routine is special. So I'm interested in how it came about.
Yeah, great question. I'm going to process that on the fly with you. I haven't thought that out too much. But I think I've got an answer. You and I have talked a little bit about the capacity equation when we met, right?
Mhm.
For the your financial capacity
Yeah.
multiplied by your time capacity by your relational capacity is, equivalent to the emotional capacity to take on any opportunity or challenge. A lot of that is boils down to the ability to be present in any given moment,
Mhm.
and look out at the landscape of life and see what's really there. Um, and within that, what that really underscores that if you invest your yourself in, you know monetarily, you invest in the ways that remove things from your time bucket that can be, you know done in other ways that money can accommodate. You free up your time to be able to build relationships, and invest in the depth and breadth of those. Well, um, the uh, oh, how do I put it? That has to start with your most intimate relationships,
Mhm.
right? I think, um, so the closest relationship that I have, um, with another individual is my wife, and so that rhythm started with me realizing, that in order for me to engage relationally well in an order of priority, I needed to find something to step towards my wife with at the start of the day, right? So,
Mhm.
you know, um, that led to just making breakfast for her. I love to cook. That's a fun way to do it. And so I mean, oh, I don't know, maybe a decade ago, I started this morning rhythm of making breakfast. And right, 10 years ago, we had a 5, 3, and 1 year old, and life is full and there's not a whole lot of time. So it was also a very tangible way to go, hey, I know it's busy. I'm going to make sure that you know, you get fed while you're feeding everybody else and getting everything going. And as the kids grew up, it just grew into, okay, we're not um, just doing cereal anymore. We kind of made it more intricate. So, it's not anything over the top, but we get to do, I like to create in that, right? So we'll do, anything from pancakes to Cuban style breakfast. My wife's from Guatemala. We have a standard Guatemalan breakfast style, and to crepes to poached eggs to whatever.
Mhm.
But I think it really grew out of that. First and foremost, I need to take that step towards Gabby in the morning to, and that sounds somewhat altruistic to her. I think it's really for me to engage in a place of, like, I need to start with those key critical, highest priorities relationships right out of the gate.
Mhm.
And I think that includes myself and my faith, and I think, you know, it is very easy in life to cut our investment in ourselves out as the first place where you know, we go, and I over time what I found was, you know, and we hear this, right? We don't actually understand, like, the more we starve ourselves for the necessary investment, you know, in our own health and our own development and our own, you know, sustainability into worthy things, the more our we're kind of stunted, right? And the more burnout's a risk, and the more.
Mhm.
But I think to the other end, the more that we invest appropriately in ourselves and are willing to look in the mirror and peel back layers of, you know, whether that's woundedness or trauma or you know, reforming neural pathways. I think neuroplasticity is absolutely fascinating, and the power of our ability to grow and you know, and change with, again, the way that life is changing around us. Um, our ability and capacity to do worthwhile things sustainably from a place of joy actually increases, right? And I love that we get the opportunity to actually put our focus and our, you know, our resources where, you know, the theory is, and see it prove out. But it's messy, right? Because it will force you to look in the mirror, right? And go, where are things breaking?
Mhm.
Where am I hurting myself? Um, and I think if we start to peel back the layers, right, and we can go into any facet of that, but we come to, you know, some place of woundedness that out of that has grown some kind of coping that has often spurred us in places of, uh, you know, uh, what we would kind of culturally perceive as success, but ultimately, like, the gear on that bicycle only performs so well, and you get to a point where it's like, okay, either pedal harder, right,
Mhm.
or you know, nothing more goes. Well, what you actually we need to do is get off the bike and find another gear and rebuild it, right? Um, and that can involve, I mean, some hard stuff, and some real challenge of, you know, why do I do what I do, and disrupting that awareness of who we know ourselves to be, and to look out into, you know, uh, the possibilities of who we can be, and take some sacrificial steps to grow there. I think the investment in that, and you know, just personal development and mentoring and therapy, um, and really getting curious about who we are, and how we can become more of, you know, who we hope to be, um, tremendously powerful, tremendously powerful, and ultimately, really hopeful in what we get to do with this limited amount of time on the earth.
Yeah. Is that something that you consciously think about on a daily basis, or do you kind of do that automatically?
Um, Probably a little bit of both. Uh, you know, when I, I I was the director of development at Shepherd Community from 2011 to 2015, and I got around a critical mass of my job was to sit across the table from people, and hear their story and learn about what they cared about and what they were trying to uh, elicit in life, and where it didn't go well and where it went great, and where you know, hurt happened, and where successes blossomed, and um, it gave me a really uh, helpful lens of time, and and a great feeling of accountability for what I do with that. And not in maybe I think the first thought there is to get really busy overextending into 1,000 different places.
Mm-hmm.
I was really challenged to actually do fewer things and focus, and start with the internal challenge of personal development, right? So if someone asks a question like, where are you justifying a behavior that you know is doing damage, right? We can actually go pretty quickly,
Mm-hmm.
right, to those places. And then if we get curious beyond that, like, why is that? And those answers don't always come fast. But as we continue to get curious and drill down and gain perspective from other, trusted sources and, and different relationships within life, the avenues of personal development that are available to us, this healing and growth starts to happen. It's interesting. The realtors I know within our brokerage that are the sustainably highest producing agents, right, are not the agents that necessarily just focus on hitting a dollar volume goal, right? That isn't their primary objective. They're not the agents that are laser locked into, the dollar volume measurables. At the core of it, they're the agents that are focused on their personal growth. And the byproduct is they rise the tide within their own personal, production. And, but that comes from a sustainable place because they're legitimately getting better at themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Than just selling real estate. And so, yeah, within that time, I feel an accountability. Absolutely. I think, uh, both, proactively and consciously and unconsciously to use time well. And sometimes that does include wasting time. That's actually okay. And being, um, unstimulated and having, isolated time or, quote unquote bored is okay.
Yeah. Well, it's not a waste in that case, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, Colin, I think it's a both and, conscious and unconscious.
Mm-hmm. One thing I'm observing in like the way that you talk, I observed this last time too, and I keep seeing it kind of reinforced, is that it seems like you really think in terms of order of operations. Like this has to happen first, and then this, and then this. And there's like a first things first kind of mentality. So for you personally, what is that order of operations in your life? Like what's first, what's second? What does that order look like?
Yeah. I do believe that absolutely starts with relationships, right? The order of relationships are that prioritization. And Colin, for most of my life, I don't think I did this tremendously well. I'd say I wasn't even necessarily consciously aware of this, right? Our culture doesn't necessarily say prioritize the most pivotal, intimate relationships in your life first and then work your way out. Right? They say,
That's not a great sales pitch from right.
yeah, right. I mean, so often, right, it is, but what I find, right, is that it is the temptation or the narrative is, well, if you go accomplish or are working really hard to go achieve these great things, then ignoring or transactionalizing those relationships that are held closest is justifiable because of your noble efforts, right?
Yeah.
Um, and boy, did I do that in the first 10 years of my marriage. God bless Gabby for working with me through that first decade. And we don't get a whole lot of great, I think, culturally modeling of this, but you know, when we know who are our partners in life, right? Our natural people who are right there, and those relationships that are uh, most dear and cherished, and we invest there, and then that isn't the end, right? And then work our way out from
Hmm.
there, right? So we all have those natural advocates. That starts from day one with our parents, right? And our grandparents, and those who are just like they are there and present. And then we work out from there to, the next layer of friends and family. And those are people who they've probably been over and had a meal at your house. They know what you're here to do, and what you're about, and what you're, working on, and same, that of them. Um, you know, they are the people who are immersed in the narrative of your life. And then the next layer out is often our community at large, right? And those are the people, like, if you see them out, you'll say hi,
Hmm.
right? But you haven't necessarily stepped towards each. You haven't gone on vacation together. You don't, you just haven't had, that time, and the life hasn't lined up to a place where you've been, shoulder to shoulder in different ways. And then past that layer is like the rest of the world that doesn't know we exist, right?
Yeah.
And so often in life, in business, in our coming up, from child to adult, we start with the most with those who don't know we exist, and we work our way back,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. I've
How often
been
in
noticing
sales
that.
do you see, hear about the cold call monster? We just got to get 100 calls in a day,
Hmm.
right? Well, hang on. Does your college roommate, your neighbor, your sibling know that you want to, like, what you're here to do? That you want to serve them in your business, right? Are they aware
Hmm.
of what you're working towards? Because most often they care about you, and they want to know how to help, right?
Yeah.
So start there, right? And work your way to the cold calls if you have time. My guess is you don't. Because if we really work in those places where we have our natural advocates in our community and that relational wealth, right? If they know how they can step towards us, and we have balance in relationship where we do similar, and we get curious about them, that tide rises, and they will engage us in the most appropriate ways towards the ends that we're pursuing in the ways that are aligned. And that will typically produce more, towards the goal than we could ever generate ourselves just out there
Hmm.
trying to go hustle and drive it in.
Yeah. I I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I want to maybe throw a framework at you, which I think you just described, but it's in different words, and hear what you think about this. So, in like the self-improvement space, we'll say there is this, or has been this, obsession with goal setting for a long
Mhm.
time. And anywhere you look about goal setting, you see things about like SMART goals, for example, and there are some other frameworks. And I've been dabbling with that for a long time. Like, all right,
Mm.
I want to set a goal. I want to make it specific, measurable, attainable, whatever, time based. And you write that down. But as I've coached people for several years now and worked on them with that, what I've noticed is that a lot of people, when I'm working with them on setting SMART goals, we get it, it's beautiful, we write it down, it's like, this is perfect to put up on a wall, whatever. And then it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that confused me a lot because the training I received suggested this is what works. Like, this is how goal setting works. Like, if you set goals this way, people achieve them. And I just didn't see that to be the case in my experience. And so, especially recently, I've been thinking about kind of what you've been talking about, which is like, what if instead of writing down like, here's my goal, here's this thing I want to achieve, what if instead I started from, okay, here are the people in my life, and here's like the closest person, kind of working through those levels that you just described.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of setting like these abstract or even specific goals that are just relative to like me doing something for myself or achieving some milestone, if instead I looked at relationship by relationship, like starting with maybe my wife or significant other or best friend or whoever's living in your household, whatever, and just said, well, what's one thing that I could do to serve that person better today or improve that
Mm-hmm.
relationship, and started like prioritizing that way instead of prioritizing with these other goals, like read 30 books this year or something like that. Like, everyone
Yeah.
can generate these kind of personal goals, but they can be separated from the real life of relationships, which is kind of how um, our realist environment, in my opinion, is our relationships. It's not even necessarily like our physical space as much as it is the people we're connected with. So I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, what if we instead, like, here's what I'm going to try to work on with my spouse, and
Mm-hmm.
here's what I'm going to try to work on with that next level, but really just focusing energy in that order. Have you like written it down that way or thought about it that way?
Yeah, yes. So I think you know, when I look at where I need to grow in a relationship, so I think I personally develop the most around just relational health within my marriage because it is the most intimate, you know, relationship I have with another physical human being. Um, and it's a safe place to learn. But when I discover a flat spot, if you will, right, in where I am in a relationship, um, it's really helpful for me to take that to Gabby and ask for her perspective
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, I think this has been going on. What do you think? Right. And sometimes her response is, oh, I never thought of that. Right. Like, tell me more. And she'll get curious and kind of help me process that out.
Mm-hmm.
Or she'll, provide vehicle like, that is definitely playing out. And I'm a little frustrated about it.
Yeah.
Like, and I maybe didn't even have words for what that was playing out, but I've been feeling that for a long time. And then we can collaborate on a path forward, right? And let's take a really simple example. Some that I think pervades our culture. Hey, I think I am at the end of the day not at my best, and I'm going to my phone as this place of digital escape, and it's keeping me from being present with you and the kids in some of the biggest chunks of the day that we get together. I need to grow in that. I'd love to hear your perspective on whether you experience that, how that's been impacting you, if you've noticed that, and then I have some thoughts on what I can do, but I'd like your thoughts on what you think would be helpful as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I'll get, I mean, that's a real life example of where
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. We have an issue there. And um let's let's plan what we're gonna do about that. And I think once you have that, within that relationship that is most affected and a partner in getting better, right? Then it isn't enough just to determine what you're gonna do to change. you have to make a commitment to, um, you can't just take something out, right? So let's take the phone, for example.
Mhm.
We can't just say, well, we're going to stop being on our phone, right? It doesn't, our brains don't work that way.
Yeah.
We have to kind
You'll
of look at
replace it.
yes.
Yeah.
And so if we can replace that with some kind of rhythm, what are we going to do in that time, right?
Mhm.
Are we going to have some time with the kids? Then is there going to be some time with just us? Are we going to read a book together? Are we going to go out for a walk? Are we going to sit on the front porch? Are we going to
Mhm.
practice, mindfulness and presence? And is this an ongoing rhythm that we're going to do? And we're just going to say from this time to this time, we don't have access to our phones? Or are we going to put this in place? And do we feel that once we've got this rhythm that we can reintroduce that,
Mhm.
and try it and adjust? I think having that other individual involved in the process of not only acknowledging it and not only determining what you're going to do, but then establishing for
Mhm.
like it. I think the research on it, my wife would know better than I do, is like you have to be in a rhythm for 3 weeks before it's in a natural cadence, right? Of it, daily practice. Um, then you've got some sustainability toward in a solution. It's not too different than hiring a trainer to work out, right? It's like I can
Yeah.
create a workout, but it's not even so much the money invested as it is the relationship with that person that is going to be there working with me on the new rhythm, right? And evolving that, throughout the course of my life. So I think that's a real key element in our growth is, it's, I think if that wasn't, then we would go to conferences and take away great information and our lives would change dramatically. Or we could
Right.
go throughout the poorest places of our nation and hand out rich dad, poor dad and go, fix that.
Problem
But it's
solved.
in that right, it's in that context of relationship and the empowerment around that helps to establish something different that, can not only be hoped for, but then actually realized.
Yeah. I hear a practical process kind of emerging here. So at one point you stated a question, um, and I don't know if I'm remembering it perfectly, but it was something along the lines of like, what is a behavior that I'm currently justifying that is not serving me? That was
Mhm.
roughly how you asked it.
Right.
And then that would probably bring up something. You gave an example of being on your phone during time that would be, you know, when you could be spending it with your family. So that might be a behavior that pops up in your head. And then you have this next step of um, going to the person who it's maybe affecting most or the person who's closest to you that's connected to that or could offer an
Mhm.
alternative perspective on that, in this case, your wife, and then
Mhm.
asking or stating what you're observing. Like, I've observed that I'm engaging in this behavior. I'm not so sure I like it. I don't know how you'd say that
Yeah.
exactly. And then, like, have you observed that too? What's your perspective? Do you have any thoughts? And then you you have this. Well, maybe you decide that the behavior really isn't that great, and you want to get rid of it, but that's not enough. It needs to be replaced with something functional there.
Yeah.
And this kind of ties us all the way back to the beginning of the conversation about the breakfast thing, which is like
Yeah.
there's a there's a rhythm that's built there, and that made me think of like I think it's tempting to your point about just information, to think, well, okay, I want my relationship with my wife or my friend or whoever to be better. Like maybe I just need to work on communication,
Mm.
which is like this very broad, like what does that even mean? Like there's nothing specific there. It's just like, well, if we communicate better, or maybe it would be helpful if you stop saying that. You know, that really bothers me. Stop saying that, which is just kind of like getting rid of something, but without a replacement.
Mhm.
And instead thinking in terms of what is a rhythm that we can both get excited about that we could start trying out and hold each other to.
Yeah.
and creating that together, like the breakfast thing.
Yeah, uh, absolutely. And I mean, this works even in um, our own internal thought processes.
Hmm.
So you'll see, especially among men, there's a lot of shame and a lot of shame loops
Yeah.
where more prevalent for men, I think, than women. I think there's you know, uh, a different loop that plays there, but not entirely. I mean, we all deal with shame, but the prevalence of these, kind of haunting memories, and they can be from when you were 4 years old, right? Of just this, that's attached to shame, right?
Hmm.
You can't just say, I'm not going to think about that anymore, and I'm not going to feel that way anymore, right? Um, there's a practice that has to come in to replace the shame and replace the perspective. And I think the most effective that I have found, in years of, I mean, processing it myself and working with others, and and combating that, you know, uh, and developing in it, is to replace that perspective with one of thankfulness, right?
Hmm.
Um, so, instead of you know, looking at that and, we feel the way we feel, but then to challenge, okay, what was, what was the grace in that moment? You know, man, thank you so much to so and so for that time. That didn't go well. You demonstrated grace. Um, Thank you so much for that uh, example, for that kindness, for that. And as we start to replace shame with thankfulness, the loop starts to break, right?
Hmm.
And um, so it isn't just external, right? Of like, oh, I'm doing these things that are affecting others or whatnot. I do think still in those moments it is really impactful within those safe relationships to share those loops. I think we all feel like, as a lot of men just feel like I'm the only one that deals with this, and and now I feel shame for feeling shame and being on these loops. It's like, oh my gosh, what but as we share that, my wife works in educational neuroscience, and she had this saying she started, using with the kids years ago, that, I just adapt. She said, what's shareable is bearable, right? Oh man,
Mm.
it's absolutely true. Right. And at the same time, it's the first time I thought it, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to share anything. Right. Like, and so, Colin, what I realized, there's two things that, really hit me through that process. One, if I feel I can't share something, that means I probably need to,
Mm.
with a safe relationship.
Yeah.
And two, if I feel, you ever have those relationships where you just you don't know at the time, but you feel like something isn't right, and you kind of press into it. And like, gosh, I
Hmm.
guess I was wrong. Gosh, what I know is when I feel consistently in a relationship that that I'm just missing the mark over and over and over and over,
Hmm.
almost like I'm not seeing that lens correctly. Um, when I evaluate that, I typically go, I've got a pretty good lens on this. I don't think I'm off. There's something else here, and I need to get curious about what's going on outside of myself. We're so driven to look inside because that's what we can control,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But often when we feel like we're just deluded about a situation, there's something else at play that is far outside of us, that is impacting, that we need to get curious about. And that can be, I mean, anything from, codependent manipulative behavior, to you know theft and fraud in business, to um, you know any myriad of you know, relational realities that are playing out. But I've learned to not brush those things off. Those are very, very important things to be in tune with and get curious about.
Yeah, you've said get curious so many times in this conversation. I love that. It's like it
It's
starts
key,
with
right?
curiosity, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If
For
you
sure.
yeah, if you don't ask, then then the answer is always no or something like that. But
Well, yeah.
or you don't get an answer at all, you're not going to find
And
out.
it's the opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
You know, I love that we have, I mean, there's so much access to information to learn. Within the last month, I've learned how to make my own kombucha at home, which is just, you know, it's just fun, right? But it's an opportunity to learn. And we had this like bumper crop of hot peppers in our garden, and I bet I can figure out how to make hot sauce. It was a
Yeah.
blast. Yeah. Now we have way too much hot sauce in our house, but
We'll
just
take some.
the
We like hot sauce.
there we go. No problem. I'll bring it over. I, that all comes out of curiosity and maybe, okay, let's say that none of that goes well. It's not the end of the world. We lost some tea, right? And some time, or, I ruined, peppers. That, but, the curiosity that to just figure out even the small things, I think leads to this rhythm of getting curious about things, in a 360. And there's just so much about this life that is really fun and worth diving into, and in the smallest, seemingly menial thing all the way up to, big giant undertakings.
Hmm. I've had an aha moment during this conversation, so I feel like I should share that. Um, I just in my line of work, I've gotten asked about building a second brain a lot. Have you heard that phrase before? Build a second brain?
I don't know that I have. Interesting. I'm curious.
Okay, well, it's just like there are essentially like note-taking tools out there. So there's like Evernote, there's Obsidian, there's a bunch of other ones, right?
Yep.
And so people will create these they're like hyperlinked note-taking systems. So if
Mm.
you've heard of Zettelkasten or things like that, it doesn't really matter. People are trying to create hyperlinked information systems that
Mm-hmm.
they can dump things into so that if they want to reference them, they can go back into their own personal like interweb that they've created.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's a way to sort of outsource a lot of that memory into something in a way that works kind of similarly to the associative way that your own memory works, rather than just writing out like Word documents. Since everything is interconnected and
Yep.
dated and everything, it kind of acts like a second memory,
Okay.
analog to your real memory. Anyway, people ask me about this because they expect that this is something I do because type of work I do, it seems like the type of thing I'd be into. I'm really not. But I get asked about it a lot. And like my response to that typically has been like, I think that's really cool and I'm not against doing that, but I'm more interested in building my first brain than building a second one. Like if my first brain isn't working very well, I'd prefer to
Mm.
work on
Mm-hmm.
that rather than building another one. But something that's, kind of this connection I had during this conversation that I hadn't really thought of before. It's like, well, it would be really cool if I could have another brain, right? Like that'd be pretty nifty. Because if I had two brains, well, maybe I could be twice as effective or even more so than if I had one.
Mm.
But then it's like, it's so obvious now. It kind of hit me during this conversation. It's like, that's what other people are,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You have a really
Absolutely.
good relationship with a spouse or a friend or a roommate or whatever. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, there's your second brain. It's like an
Yeah.
actual second brain, and it offers a completely different perspective, set of experiences,
Mm.
um, and memories that you don't have.
Mm.
Like, I think that would be like, that is far more powerful than even having your own hyperlinked, like virtual document system. Like, what if instead of
Absolutely.
investing in that, and I'm not saying people shouldn't do that, but instead of investing in that, investing in like that closest relationship and like, there's your second brain. So I just wanted to share that because it was an
That's
aha.
really good. Well, and Colin, when you learn, I mean, first and foremost, in your own like personal awareness, when you learn your strengths, you learn where other people's strengths complement, right?
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of ways to evaluate that. One of my mentors shared with me something really helpful a while back that was, he said, I've noticed there are kind of people default to one of three modes of thinking, right? And one is that linear thinker who has the goal and they're going to get there, right? Boom, 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 but this is how we do it. Let's go execute.
Yeah.
And the strength in that is they'll get there, right? They know the path and they will execute, and it's on. The risk in it is they don't see the flanks where they can get clipped and slowed down and
Yeah.
and taken out and whatnot. And then you have the cloud thinkers where everything is connected in touches, right? And the the way that these all could come together and touch, and like it is intensely relational and everything is interconnected, and you can see those individuals. The strength is they see the way that something ripples out, right, within anything that is done. And the challenge in that, right, is often gaining the clarity that the linear thinker has towards the goal and lining something up, right? And then you have these, four-dimensional thinkers who will take into account the exposure and the risks towards the goal, but often just take too long to make the decision, right? And need the strength of that cloud thinker and the drive of the linear thinker to press them to bring that together and go. And so if you know where you fit into that, right, within a given, need, right, or facet in life, you can bring others in to, to be that second brain. And what you don't necessarily need is that second brain that does it just the way you do.
Yeah, right.
It's the second brain that can go, well, hang on. Have you thought about this? Have you looked at it this way? Well, what if we put this over here? And I think that's where having someone who, that relational second brain is so valuable when we look to, to use your words, create that second brain, right? We're typically going to create that out of our strengths. When we engage that second brain or third brain, or and we do that in a place where we need their strengths to complement ours, I think we gain a ton of power towards the goal.
Yeah. If I try to build my own second brain, like it's just going to reflect the same strengths and weaknesses of my first one. I'm not going to have that complementary effect that you just described.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't expect to talk about that today. I love that. I love that we went that direction.
It's fun.
I'm definitely in the out of the three you just described. I think my wife is the first and I'm the second. I don't even fully understand the third based on how you described it. I'm not exposed to that as much.
Yeah, you'll I think the 4D thinkers are often those that I see who they're really good at looking out on the horizon and arranging the pieces in a complicated reality. Often then getting sidetracked or overwhelmed in that when it gets really hard. Right. So you'll often see in people, like they'll drag towards an initiative until they hit the abyss of the unknown, and then they'll go check email and knock out a bunch of easily executable tasks, right? And it'll get procrastinated, on down the line. But the most, interestingly enough, the most effective 4-dimensional thinkers I know are aware of that, weakness, and are really, really good at bringing in the other, two types to really press them to movement, right? And to take the next hard step. That's and I think that is probably a rarer thought type. But I think all of them have tremendous power when they learn where they are and how to engage the others, to go achieve anything. That you bring those 3 types together on a team, look out. They're going to do something great, really great.
Yeah. It also makes me think of, I've been thinking about Maslow's 8-stage hierarchy a lot recently. It's really informed my thinking. Are you familiar with the 8-stage model that he has?
I believe so. Are you thinking of the hierarchy of needs? Is that, or is it
Yeah.
different?
So he made 2 versions of this. Like he made one earlier in his career, which was the 5-stage model. And that's what most people
Okay.
are familiar with. So you've
Oh,
got
we went to 8 stages. No, this is like,
yeah, over later in his career, he put out this 8-stage model, but by then the 5-stage model was popular and people were like, well, we don't need another one because we like this one and it's 5, and 5 is easier to think about. 8 is kind of starting to break our working memory limits.
yep.
People kind of ignored it, but it was like actually it added some really important pieces. So the reason I bring that up, it's on my mind a lot recently, but like the 5-stage model, you go from like the basic physiological needs, and then you have safety, and then love and belonging, and then you have esteem, and then you have self-actualization at the top of the 5-stage model. The 8-stage model is different because it just adds 3 different levels to the top that weren't there before. So under self-actualization, it also adds aesthetic and cognitive. And then above self-actualization, it adds transcendence, self-transcendence. And when I was first looking into this, I thought that the self-transcendence idea, I thought what that meant was kind of detaching from the world, because that's what it sounds like when I hear transcendence. I kind of think of somebody like their ghost leaves their body and they kind of float out in some ethereal realm. They're like separate from everything. And I think I've read descriptions of that from several different sources describing it kind of that way. Like you remove yourself from the world, you become detached. But as I, kind of studied Maslow's perspective more, that isn't what he was talking about at all. It was almost the opposite. It was, at a certain point, you start to, the way that your thinking shifts is you start to think about others, not just in the way that they're instrumental to you and your own survival, but you're now able to go outside of your own survival and think about how you can help the next person. So like, okay, well now I'm actually thinking about my spouse, not just in the way like, how can they make my life better, but how can I make their life better for them, not just for me. And then a step further of, well, maybe children or maybe neighbors or the people that I go to work with or people I attend religious ceremonies with or whatever. And then outside to my local community, and then, the world, it keeps expanding, but it's networking to other people, which to me is actually becoming more immersed and more connected, not less connected. You're not detaching, you're actually attaching more to the world. And so like as I've been, processing our conversation, I've been seeing that kind of come up over and over, is this idea of like, as you're moving up, you are thinking more about how can I connect at a deeper level with other people, not how can I focus more on myself or kind of like remove myself from the world. I don't know. I just wanted to share those thoughts.
That's really good. I think when we have clarity on our purpose, right? On what we're here to do, I have to boil things down into imperfect metaphors so that I can do anything in a day, right? And so I look at it as when I get the opportunity to coach, connect, and or create,
Mhm.
I get to operate within my purpose. And the more that those circles are concentric, typically the more I'm getting to live into purpose.
Yeah.
And when we can take the abundance mindset, we as we step towards, right? So we get kind of one of three positions. Do we talk about this when we got together? We get one of three positions to take as we engage the world, right? And one is like fist closed, like I gotta win. And you're gonna lose so I can win.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The other is like is a kind of disenfranchised, disassociated, like I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna make me, and I'm not gonna be affected. Right.
Mhm.
And the other is this hands open, vulnerable step where you are moving towards people in those places of your greatest purpose, and you can still get hurt and hurt bad.
Yeah.
The world will come at you. It
Yeah.
absolutely will, no doubt. But it is the only position to step towards the world from your purpose. It's worth it,
Hmm.
right? And I think there's some real tension between that and North American culture
Hmm.
that we have to wrestle with, right? Because we will get taken advantage of in life. We will have hurts. We will take it. Everybody is imperfect, stepping towards others who are imperfect.
Hmm.
We see this play out a lot in institutions, right? Or whether that's religion or education or healthcare or what, we have imperfect people, moving, within an institution. You're gonna have hits that are taken. You're gonna have damage that plays out. And yet, the only productive path I know and engaging that from a healthy way is to step towards that scenario, that individual, that institution from a place of not foolishness,
Hmm.
but the abundance of like, what am I here to do? And I'm going to move in that way and try to rise the tide in the ways that I can, knowing that the hits are going to come. And that doesn't make the hits okay. It doesn't excuse them, but it at least sets the expectation that they're coming, that they're not surprising, and that we can still be tender to them, and and in that still, and even more so, move in the ways that we are able and meant to move in. And I think that's tremendously powerful. I see that in the brokerage arena, realty, right?
Hmm.
So there's so much of a temptation. Your contacts and your experiences and your knowledge. And what's interesting about that, and Mark Nottingham, my business partner, I've talked about this quite a bit. It's one of the major reasons we partnered in this alignment, was that when you have a culture where you share those experiences, those
Hmm.
contacts, right? Those resources, and you engage that and proactively instill that culture within, the group and the brokerage, everybody does better.
Hmm.
Everybody sees more success towards their goals, right? So even if you were just completely like capitalist, heartless, whatnot, like the business methodology says you should probably still do that, right?
Yeah.
But it's so hard to take that on because it invites the reality that you are vulnerable. You're going to take some of those hits, and it will be hard because we're 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 hard. We're all in process and imperfect, moment to moment.
Yeah. What I'm hearing out of that is the most meaningful rewards require the most significant risks.
I think
And
within our, yeah, well, within the context of relationship, right? When we let people in,
Mhm.
uh, we invite the opportunity for it. It doesn't hurt me that much if someone I don't know is mad at me,
Yeah, right.
right? It's like, go take a drive for anywhere around 20 minutes and you can establish that, right? But when you're known and you take a shot, uh, you know, justified or not, you're vulnerable and it hurts. And um, it's hard, right? Um, but there's opportunity even within that. Even when we are taken advantage of, when the most disingenuous narrative is used to fill in the gaps in information, we still have the opportunity to take that posture of abundance and step towards people and move in that purpose and rise the tide. And it's very tempting not to. I get, and I have not arrived in this,
Mhm.
but it's absolutely where I think the best work is done, and we get to lead from that place of abundance and vulnerability in a way that gives the opportunity for an environment where people can hope to do the same and practice that. And if enough people start doing that, the collective tide rises much faster. Yeah.
Yeah.
University High School has something I think this is really interesting. A friend of mine was talking about the ownership of the culture there, where students will own what they will do and what they not do, to where these students can go up to another student and say, "Hey, we don't do that here, right?
Mhm.
Let me talk to you about that," and bring others into it. I love that. Yeah, that's some great leadership that is uh, taking that and empowered kids, and it takes that leadership moving in that way and instilling that out within the stakeholders for the kids to grab onto that and move. Um, so I think that's critically important for us to move well. And don't get me wrong, we can take the other postures and still have, you know, measurable monetary success for some time.
Yeah.
But I think it could be pretty debatable as to whether or not that is good.
Yeah, right. I was thinking like if you take a risk relationally, um, you might lose everything. You might suffer
Mhm.
and experience a lot of pain. But if you don't, if you never take those risks, you may never really taste what life has to offer. And there's also like what you're talking about is if nobody takes those risks, well, I mean, we're kind of living in hell at that point.
Yeah,
That's
right.
how I think about it. Like that hell might be thought of as the place in which nobody takes the risk to form a meaningful relationship.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of a middle school dance, right? Everybody's sitting up against the wall. Uh,
Oh, what no better description of hell than a middle
right?
school dance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the beautiful risk taking that is walking across the room and being the proactive spark to engage someone and get curious about them and connect is one of the, I think, the great elements of the DNA of the community within Indianapolis and central Indiana. I don't see this in other communities the way that I see that here. And it is an element, I hope, as we continue our this speaking of a rising tide, this development within, our city and state. I think it's critical to be. I think it's one of our great superpowers is the accessibility and the collective effort to raise this community up. as we continue to develop is extremely special and beautiful, and still imperfect. We have tons of things we need to be doing better. But I believe that our community actually exemplifies that far better than any other community that I've had the opportunity to experience and work in.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I've observed about you, Rex, that I think is so cool is that you exist in a specific time and space, which that sounds really weird, but what I'm saying is, like, in your language, you're constantly bringing up local examples of things. Like, you just talked about university, high school, you talked about Heron High School earlier, you talked about local businesses. Like, I think our world has become so geographically, like, delocalized. I don't know, like, people have kind of lost their sense of being part of a local community largely.
Yeah.
Partially because of the internet and cars and like all these things that, you know, make our immediate physical environment less important to us.
It's a real challenge there.
Yeah, but every time you talk, like, your language is local. You think in terms of Indianapolis and where you live, and I think that that's kind of critical to the philosophy you've described, of like this relational philosophy. Like, if we don't exist in a specific time and place, and we're kind of just like floating in this abstract, like everywhere, every time, all at once, we kind of float in between spaces. It's really difficult to build meaningful relationships when you aren't somewhere at some time. You're kind of everywhere all at once.
You know, Colin, I think there's a really important piece there that's actually playing out today that's very much it is something that we should all evaluate within our own lives and how we move. And I think technology has played a part as a tool in this, but I think COVID has accelerated this, and the acceleration of work from home, and which I think has some strengths. Right, there are good pieces, and there are good ways to use the tools of technology and social media. They're really good and powerful ways to use the rapid growth and proliferation of remote work. There's also some damage that we're seeing ripple out within that, some of these more disconnected elements, and that is, if you look at the difference between a digital and an analog signal, right? The digital signal gets the highs and the lows, and it cuts out everything in between. And an analog signal, you get the full range, right? And this is a big criticism when, you went from records to tapes and
right.
CDs, okay? So this is not a perfect metaphor, but I think within social media, and I think within remote work, and I think within this, let's even take gaming. When video games first came out, you had to go to a restaurant or an arcade where people were to engage them. And then you had the home console proliferate, but you still had to have friends over to engage that. And today, you can engage in gaming, without ever physically seeing anybody else, right? Similar within our social arena, up until the 1940s, I believe over half the world's population couldn't read. You didn't have the proliferation of mass media. And so, education and information, news, it was all right here.
Yeah.
That's how we learned for most of human history. And then you have this ramp up of mass media, and now today into these digital places where we often get the highs and the lows. And we look at that within where we find our belonging. And if we find our belonging within those places, right? And as media continues to polarize, I think what we're seeing within, media in general is the profitability motivators are incentivizing this kind of polarization of positions.
Yeah.
Right. And these communities, even in some of the healthiest communities that we find in the online environment, we're getting the equivalent of the digital markers, the highs and the lows. but boy, do we miss a lot in between.
Yeah.
And so I think we each have to look at the way that we're using technology and remote work and how we just move throughout our day with these tools within the reality of our own personal health. And I think if we measure that against, where was I in just natural relational connectedness 10, 20 years ago relative to today, I think it would really surprise us. And I think there's not only a great accountability to decide to use those tools in certain ways and not others, and in certain times and time limits and not beyond, and then look for ways to get those analog engagements for health. I think we gain tremendous, maybe more impact and health in that, and ability to to help others more so than ever before, because I think we're screaming more for that connectivity, that
Mhm.
analog engagement,
Yeah.
more than we ever have before. And I'm going to put something out here that I'm still researching. So
Okay.
this is not,
Asterisk.
yes. And let's ask her to again with, this is a realtor, not a clinical researcher. But I've been researching uh, the environment of mass shootings within schools recently, and just trying to understand what is what are the consistencies around this phenomenon that we've seen within the U.S. more than anywhere else. And so far, and I would invite feedback to this. If someone wants to email me coming out as whatnot, please do. I haven't been able to find what would fall into a definition of a mass shooting at a school that has existed within an inner city. And as best I can tell, in the inner city where the resources and the access is most limited and the stress per household is arguably highest, it would seem logical that you would have the greatest reaction, okay, and a stress response um, in if that's something that we're seeing in the U.S., that is an anomaly outside of it. And I wonder, Colin, if it is within the inner city, you can't isolate enough to completely lose your understanding of your interconnectedness. I don't know this for sure. This is all theoretical
Yeah, sure.
pondering, but you are going to experience and observe enough other people at different points in their lives, living differently, doing different things, engaged in different, lifestyles, behaviors, thought patterns, whatnot, that you gain this understanding of where you fit and where you don't. To maybe an extent we don't even have words for, but it gives us context. It seems where this kind of this the context of the phenomenon of mass shootings has kind of grown up is in those places where it is easiest to lose or disassociate and not know where your place is. I got a lot more work to do on that. I'm hesitant to even mention that in a public forum, but
That's all right. Triple
I think
asterisk.
I think it's worth worth looking
Yeah,
at.
sure.
and wondering what, because we should see that in the communities that have the highest levels of observable constraint and stress, and we don't, by and large.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If someone listening to this is an expert on this topic, feel free to email, and
Please.
I can give an update later, and I can pass it on to Rex too, because I'm interested
That'd be great.
in more about that as well. Well, Rex, we do have only a couple minutes here. Is there one message that weighs on your heart that you'd love to share? Like, if you could share it with every single person on the planet, something you'd like everyone to know or hear.
Yeah, that's really good, Collin. I think I think the one thing that's really important is that we've hit a lot on relationship here. And I think we all, to some extent, are really just waiting for someone else to walk across the room and introduce themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a hard thing to do. Okay. But if we are willing to know and be known, and if we're willing to be the proactive element that's going to walk across the room and introduce yourself, and even if it doesn't go well, do it again. We give the opportunity to not only know the other individual, but be known ourselves.
Yeah.
And Collin, there's one consistent pattern that I've seen in every individual and every leader I've known that has just had a dumpster fire moral failure. Whatever that may be. And it started out with getting way too busy. And it moved to isolation through that busyness. And the busyness and the isolation led to entitlement. And that entitlement invited a compromise that they would have never made had they had the critical mass of safe relationship around them. If we are known and know it, I mean, I would, if we are known well and in a regular daily cadence by even a handful of people, it is critically empowering to not only keep us from the worst depths we can go to, but also in having the hope to do our best and most joyful and sustainable work in this, again, limited amount of time we have. So that would be my, I guess, plea would be take the risk, and know it'll be imperfect. There'll be those introductions that don't go well, but 100% worth the risk, because even if 1 out of every 100 is someone who steps towards, right, and aligns, there is just massive power in that can produce more than we ever give it credit for.
Well, I learned today, so thank you.
It's great to be here. I really enjoyed getting to do this with you. Please let me know if there's anything that I can do to help as you continue to put these together and put it out into the world. This is a lot of fun.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Collin. Take care.
The Superhuman Academy podcast is hosted by Collin Jewett and designed and edited by Army Cinco, with original music by Joshua Schunig and voiceovers by Corey Page Schunig. That's me. You can find past episodes and resources, as well as access to the ever-growing Superhuman Academy community at superhumanacademy.com. If you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice.